Our film this week is The Last Picture Show. So I just wanted to go over some kind of basics and things to look for about the film. And so this goes along with the PowerPoint that is up on Moodle. So The Last Picture Show is a 1971 American film. The director is Peter Bogdanovich. He was in his early 30s at the time, a fairly young director, one of the directors of what we refer to as New Hollywood. So a lot of the conversations we had in our Zoom class Monday evening about the French New Wave and a lot of the reading you did about the French New Wave, we kind of have our version of that in America in the late 60s and early 70s, largely with the production company that is best known for this film, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So the cast, you'll recognize probably some of the cast members, including Jeff Bridges and Randy Quaid. They're very young versions of actors you might recognize from some films now. And the writers, so Larry McMurtry had written a novel based on his childhood in Texas called The Last Picture Show, and Bogdanovich had picked it up and looked at it, and it turned into a feature film that he made that got major accolades. So McMurtry worked on the screenplay and adapting his novel for the screenplay. So I linked you to an essay at the Criterion Collection. This film is in the Criterion Collection. And I also linked you to Roger Ebert's review, which I like for you to look at those before you watch. Not to get spoilers so you know what happens, but to kind of go into a film knowing what critics and like critical analysis of the film looks like as you watch. So hopefully you pick up on the same things. So this film was made and debuted in 1971, but it takes place in the early 1950s. I think something, and it's about teenagers kind of at the end of their high school years into college military work years. So kind of just in that era. When you think about the popularity of, I think especially coming of age pop culture, we so often look 20 years back to set films, TV shows. I think I've had conversations with some of you about this before. When Happy Days was popular, when that 70s show was popular. Now we see a lot of kind of 90s pop culture being popular again. So there's this very kind of typical going back 20 years to use that as a setting while making kind of modern commentary about things that are going on. So we certainly see that here with this film. So it was a critical darling. It got nominated for 8 Academy Awards and won 2. This is a flagship film of New Hollywood, and it was financed by Raybert Productions, which had been BBS, which was a production company that it really focused in the mid-60s a lot on kind of music and pop culture. So the Monkees, a TV show and a band. And then the production company, as far as film is concerned, they produced Easy Rider and 5 Easy Pieces, which both of those are available for you to stream via the Swank Motion Pictures link, where you'll find this film. And I strongly encourage you, if you have time to look at those films, to do so, because they're just really excellent. And again, really kind of exemplify that era of New Hollywood. So we see this kind of shift in Hollywood cinema in the early 90s. And it's kind of, again, looking to what we've seen in other eras of filmmaking, really holding on to kind of a rejection of what came before to model something new. And the popularity of kind of youth culture at this time and music, we talked about this on Monday as well, how that very naturally signifies a break from the past, and kind of what that means in terms of coming of age films. So The Last Picture Show is noteworthy in that it's both old and new. So it's very new in its structure, its commentary about sexuality in a dying small town, gender. It has a lot of new ideas in it that were very topical at the time, but it's set in the early 1950s. And making it in black and white was a really conscious choice to make it feel that way. It depicts loss, loneliness, and failure of family, and the pipe dream of love, and really timeless themes, but also within that context of, we're still in that era of a lot of social and sexual upheaval in the late 60s and early 70s. A fun trivia fact, Orson Welles, who you remember from Citizen Kane, so he was an older filmmaker at the time, and he was a house guest. He was staying with Bogdanovich at the time, and he talked him through a lot and recommended, kind of in conversations, Bogdanovich decided to use black and white film to really convey the nostalgia and facilitating those deep focus shots and those really strong contrasts. And remember too, when we think about nostalgia, especially when we look at films like this or texts like this that are old and new at the same time, the word nostalgia from the Greek roots means nostros and algia, which means to go back with pain. So there's this idea of the function of memory, especially remembering youth or remembering times that have passed, that also comes with this kind of emotional pain of what has been lost and what is changing. So this is kind of an important thing to note. You'll notice a lot of long shots in terms of cinematography. Again, the screenplay was adapted from a novel that was published in the mid-1960s. The soundtrack of this film is really important to note. So mostly diegetic sound. So when we say diegetic sound, that means that is sound that's happening in the world of the film. A character turns on a radio, a character turns on a jukebox, they're at a dance and music is playing. That's diegetic sound. Non-diegetic sound is what you would think of as a film score. So the music that is played in the background that isn't part of the character's world. So this film is really noteworthy for its use of diegetic sound and the use of pop songs, so music that was popular at the time in the soundtrack. So that's really interesting to think about soundtracks and kind of the use of sound and how that conveys meaning. So really kind of heavy themes with JC, who's played by Sybil Shepherd. It's kind of this femme fatale role, but certainly if you were doing, a Freudian analysis of this, kind of the Oedipal revenge themes that we see with her character. She acts on desire, the use of female sexuality, the conversations she has with her mom, who's played by Ellen Burstyn, just some we see the clashes of that time in terms of ideas of female sexuality through that lens of a coming of age film. And class issues also with JC, think about. Rituals. So rituals that we see in this film that we often see in teen movies and coming of age movies: loss of virginity, going to the movies, the picture show in the title, diners, the pool hall, football games, going into the army after high school, cars, the importance of vehicles. So all of these rituals, if you think of any teen movies that you're familiar with, whether they were from 1950 or 2010s, you'll see some, if not all, of these themes. These are really, really common themes and rituals in American teenage coming of age films. This film is on lots of lists. Again, a lot of critical acclaim. Yeah, so I hope that you enjoy The Last Picture Show. It's a really beautiful film. It's a really kind of melancholy, difficult film, and we had those conversations about the 400 blows too, and how often that occurs with coming of age films. But it's also uniquely American in thinking about the time period that it was made. Again, 1971, yet it's set in the early 50s. So thinking about that tension between times and how that lends to meaning. So enjoy the film, take copious notes, imagine approaching it from one of the critical literary theories that we talked about, and imagine what you could say about the film through one of those lenses. So enjoy.